that's like the other thing. Like as soon as people are like, oh, we can win by pitch stacking this, and this, and it's like 3 reds in there, I'm just like, nah, this is like, forget about it. It's not gonna work. Like it's just, if they're 3 blues, sure, but yeah, I think people get a little bit too fancy, Just Fab's really mathy. Just do the boring stuff. It's usually pretty good.
Good day and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bryce Platz, and I am here for the first ever official episode of Cardboard and Beyond. This interview series I've been doing on YouTube. What the heck? It's always been a podcast, but we're finally coming to terms with it. So we're dropping all the pretense, and besides finding us on the AGE YouTube channel, you can also find us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And if that is not exciting enough, our inaugural guest for Cardboard and Beyond is none other than Yuki Lee Bender. Yuki has been one of the flesh and blood players to watch since she won Canadian Nationals back almost 3 years ago. And besides that, she is undeniably devoted to sharing her process and making our community a better place. Yuki, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's super exciting to be on and for the first, I guess, official podcast, even though you've been kind of doing this for a while. It's still an honor to be here. So thanks so much for having me, and I'm looking forward to chatting with you.
I finally accepted who I am, and you're the person to help me kind of walk through that door. So the awesome. Feeling is mutual. I'm very excited. Before we get into flesh and blood, we always like to talk about who the person is before us, create more of a three-dimensional picture of the person that we see on feature matches, podcasts, teaching videos as well, what have you. So first and foremost, Yuki, why card games? Why have they captivated you so much?
Yeah, so I played card games since I was little, and I think I always enjoyed the creativity in the deck building, especially just sort of like all the different things you can do and all the different combinations of cards. Really spoke to me. I also have always loved math, and there's of course a lot of overlap between card games and mathematics. So I find that really interesting, and sort of like applying mathematics to real situations like card games is something that I find really fascinating. So that's a lot of the draw for card games for me. And then the other one that's sort of like my early draw as a kid, and then I think what got me back into card games, especially in-person card games over digital ones, was the personal connection. It was sort of like right after COVID, wanting to kind of get back out there and do stuff again. I guess like right before COVID and then right after as well. Just wanting to make, new connections, meet new people, get out there, and card games are such a fantastic tool for that. So yeah, I kind of like started with like tabletop games, and then I remembered playing card games as a kid and got back into it, and I've been really into it for the last 10 years or so again. So yeah, kind of funny. I had this like big gap in the middle where I didn't play card games, even though I played it as a kid forever. And then here I am again, kind of wound up back where I started.
And speaking of when you were a kid, I think one of your first card game ever was actually Magic the Gathering when you were around 8. You had a cousin that got you into it. Is that correct?
It was actually, I was like 4. My friends, I guess my babysitter's son was into it, and he showed me some of the cards, and I thought it was cool. And then I brought some of them home, and my friend at school was also like kind of interested, and I was like, Mom, how do I play this game? I don't know how to play this game. And she read through the rule book and tried her best to teach me. And so I played a lot at school and just with my family. It was like super, super casual, but I spent so much time poring over cards, making decks, and doing all of that. It was like I just pull out the cards and go through them and read them and see what I could do with them, and I'd spend hours doing that. But I didn't really know about like organized. I certainly didn't know about tournaments, and I didn't even know about like like FNM or armories like equivalent. Like I didn't even know about pre-release. Like I was just playing at home, but it was a lot of fun.
We're about 4 minutes in, and you're already making me tear up a little, because mothers that teach kids card games even though they know nothing about it are. My mother did the same thing with me and Pokemon. There were a couple nights that we spent very late into the evening where she was trying to figure out how to play this ridiculous game that her kid was into. So that's really cool that you had that relation. Does she still play at all?
No, not really. She asked me about, how I'm doing, and occasionally she'll be like, "Is this a good card?" or something, but she doesn't really follow or know too much about it. But she kind of gets it. She's supportive, and we played for quite a few years growing up. So on some level, she gets it for sure. Maybe not like the competitive um, side of it, but I think she sees the appeal of the game. So yeah,
I tend to think that that Magic the Gathering is kind of a bridge further than most 4-year-olds would go. Um,
yeah.
I definitely think that there are other card games that cater to a younger crowd like that. Do you can you access 4-year-old Yuki, and what is it about Magic that really captivated her?
Um, I mean, at the time, I don't know if there was a lot of other card games. When I was playing Magic, I started playing, and it was like fourth edition. Um, so I'm pretty old, and I remember Pokemon cards coming out a little bit later when I was in elementary school, and some of my classmates and stuff getting into that. But that was certainly like a few years after I was already into Magic. So at the time, it was just kind of like the trading card game, and I think just like the art and the I don't know, just like the imagination of it was really intriguing. So yeah, it's sort of a strange thing. Like I don't normally think of like super little kids getting into card games, especially Magic, where it's pretty complicated. But for whatever reason, I was pretty into it, and yeah, I don't know, it stuck.
Yuki, you're also a teacher, although not a whole lot nowadays. You mainly
Yeah.
substitute. Um, but when you were teaching full time, what subject and grade did you teach?
So I taught high school, kind of all the grades for high school. So I was grades 9 through 12 for us, and I taught business classes, so marketing and accounting. I taught mathematics, mostly math like 10. And I did a little bit of like just odds and ends. You kind of do that early in teaching careers. You just pick up things. I did a biology class. I helped out in an English class. I taught HTML, even though I had never done HTML before. So it's a lot of picking things up and figuring it out. And even if you're not an expert, you can help them learn. So yeah, that's a lot of what I did. And then at some point, I kind of had to choose between Flesh and Blood or teaching. I just couldn't get enough time off from teaching to go to events. I was like, well, one of these has to give, and it felt like things were really picking up for me in Flesh and Blood at the time. I had sort of had some good finishes at callings, and would later, just like after deciding to make that jump, I would go on to top 8 worlds that year in Barcelona. So kind of never looked back, but yeah, it was definitely sort of like I had to take a jump one way or another. And the nice thing about teaching is it is, it's unionized, there's seniority. So I very much had the safety net to know that I can substitute teach, fill in shifts when I need to, and if I want to go back to kind of where I was, I could do that pretty easily. So it made it easier to kind of take that risk, I guess.
Mm. A lot of people say that teaching is a calling, and based on the way I assume you approach your career and also the way that you approach the Flesh and Blood community in terms of being a coach, being encouraging of newer or players that want to improve, I tend to think that it is a calling for you. Would you agree?
Yeah, I like helping others and seeing them improve and having them have those like aha moments where they get something and they feel like they make a breakthrough. That's always those are my favorite moments. And it's like exciting to see people feel themselves getting better, feel themselves improving, and being excited about that. And I think that just being part of that process is really special and something I really treasure. And that definitely is a big draw for me to all the stuff I'm doing in Flesh and Blood now, which is mostly coaching, content creation, podcasting. Is a lot of it is sort of sharing what I know, helping other people get better, and quite literally teaching people in the case of coaching, or writing articles that are designed to be instructive and helpful. And teach people things that they might not know otherwise. So it's kind of a neat way to apply a similar skill set, and I think I get to. I don't think like going into teaching school, this is not where I thought it would lead, but there's a lot of I think I benefit from that experience, and they supplement each other really nicely, and kind of yeah, it's interesting how life kind of leads you down different paths, and you kind of draw on all the different things you've done, and they kind of culminate into something new.
And perhaps how, if you are open to specific opportunities, if you open yourself up to what the universe has to offer you, you can kind of find a niche based on the skills you've developed along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it can be really easy to kind of like have a path and be content with that path and stick with it, and that can be really comforting and safe. But there's also just so many possibilities out there, especially, I mean, in the day and age that we live in, where you can travel anywhere, and within a day you can be online, talk to anybody. There's just so many options out there. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities, and the world is a far bigger place than we realize. I think there's just so much going on. It's really interesting.
It makes me wonder, Yuki, the way you talk about teaching and the gratification it gives you seeing other people level up and become better versions of themselves. Is there someone in your past that kind of instilled this love of teaching in you? Was there perhaps like a super influential teacher in your early life?
Yeah, I as a kid I really liked school, and I definitely had some teachers that I remember kind of just giving me I think in school I was often a little bit bored. Like I liked studying, I liked school, I liked some of the projects, but often things felt a little bit too closed, or a little bit like not challenging enough.
Mm.
Really early on in my school, I went to Montessori, which is sort of like very free form. You can kind of work on what you want to work on. You can work at the level you want to work at. So I was working several grades above me for math and reading and stuff like that. And then later I went into a mainstream program, and it felt very, very limiting. And I did
Mm.
have a teacher who was really fantastic about um, giving me similar projects to everyone else, but giving me room to, challenge myself or do extra things, or kind of prompting me to put in more work. And she was really incredible. So yeah, I think I definitely think back to that teacher, and a few others. I've had several teachers that I really look up to, but yeah, there were some very good role models that really I think showed me what a difference a person can make if they're really invested in you um, improving and learning, and getting better at things.
And clearly inspired you to try to unlock that in somebody else as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's turn now, Yuki, to the etymology of your name. It's something you're proud of. Yuki means snow in Japanese, and you have expressed a profound passion for winter and ice, not just in the context of flesh and blood, but in the world in general. So I have to ask, what is your favorite place in the entire world to be cold?
My favorite place. Probably Whistler Mountain, or just skiing in general. There's a bunch of amazing mountains in British Columbia, the province that I live in Canada, and I've been skiing pretty much my entire life. So yeah, I just love skiing. I think outside of card games, that's probably the other hobby that I've been doing for the longest time, and is just really like foundational to who I am. It's a little bit harder to get out these days, because Flesh and Blood really is taking up quite a bit of time, but I always
Mm.
try to make time to go up and, you know, get the fresh air, be on the slopes, and enjoy that. So yeah, probably Whistler, or maybe like Revelstoke is another favorite mountain. But honestly, just the activity of skiing in general is something I really love. It's fantastic.
You've been skiing since you were very young. I have been too. So you're preaching to the choir. Um,
Yeah.
it it has it is Whistler your local mountain?
Um, Not really. So my local mountains are like Cypress or Grouse. Those are maybe like 30, 40 minutes away. They're not bad. They're not super high elevation, so the snow is a little bit spotty, but they're very convenient. Whistler is about an hour and a half drive away, so
Mm.
you can do it. I do it sometimes as a day trip. It's great to have access to that. Um, my uncle used to go up and have a season's pass, and he'd ski like 40, 50 days. I don't know how he did that. That's with the hour and a half drive. That's a lot, at least for me, with a full day of skiing on top. But yeah, I usually do at least a few days up at Whistler each year, and then I ski locally more regularly, just because it's far more convenient, and you can kind of go up for part of a day. It doesn't have to be like a full. I find with Whistler, it's like you get up at 5 a.m., you get ready, you go
Mm.
there. It takes the whole day. You get back, and you're like ready for bed, which is fine sometimes, but not always. I don't know. It's a big commitment.
Were the family members that you skied with early on into this whole like first lift, last lift thing? Because that was definitely a
Yeah,
part of my childhood. So,
yeah, absolutely. These days, like maybe not so much. I think everybody's kind of chilled out. We've done it long enough, and it's just like, okay, we've had our fun. You don't have to ski every last moment, but there was a lot of that growing up, and for Whistler specifically, the tickets are pretty pricey. I don't have a pass or anything, and the drives are pretty big commitment. So I don't have to be there first lift. I don't have to be there until the very end, but I want to ski most of the day. Otherwise, it's not really worth it to go for 2 hours, you know. So
do you think your parents have a similar love of the cold based on the name they gave you?
I don't know. They got into skiing. We got into skiing like sort of as a family. We started cross country and then later did downhill. So I think it was more to do with my birthday being in January and it being wintertime,
Mm.
but I don't think that they necessarily had a huge affinity for the snow. My dad did grow up in, oh god, he grew up all over, but he spent quite a bit of time in Toronto at least, and kind of back east where they have a little bit harsher winters. So he was probably pretty used to the snow, but I don't know if he had like an affinity for it like you're talking about. So I think it's mostly based on kind of when my birthday was. Yeah.
So let's turn now to possibly one of the more important relationships in your life. Your partner, Ellie Bird, is a very prominent member of our community and also an incredible flesh and blood player in her own right, which I think makes you and Ellie the most prominent power couple in flesh and blood. I
Oh
can't think of
no.
another one.
Um yeah, I guess maybe. That's kind of funny. Yeah, I met her playing Flesh and Blood back at Pro Tour Baltimore, I guess it was. I was in the line for coffee. She also was. We chatted a tiny bit. Um she made day two and was crushing it. I think she told me how she beat up Matt Rogers. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I did not make day two. That event didn't go my way. I was playing the calling. And that was kind of it. Like we just had a really brief chat. Ellie likes to say that her pickup line was that when we introduced ourselves, she didn't know who I was. Because sometimes I go to introduce myself and they go, "Oh no, I know who you are," and I'm like, "Oh, okay." Like this is sure. It's like it's a weird sensation, but I've started to get. It happens enough that I'm somewhat used to it.
Mm-hmm.
So Ellie likes to joke that. I don't know how much of a factor that was, but we talked more after that, sort of online here and there, and yeah, I guess fast forward. Now we're very much together. We're living together, and yeah,
What is it like having a partner that is as diehard about flesh and blood as you?
honestly, it's great. I was in a different relationship like early on in Flesh and Blood, and I bless my partner for listening to me and putting up with me, but I don't know how he managed it. It was very much a like I would blab on and on and on, and he knows card games. He played Magic, but still like I don't know how I don't know how he put up with that. But it's really nice having somebody who's not just gets card games, but is passionate about the same game in the same way. It's not by no means the only thing that we share or the only thing that we talk about, but we spend a lot of time talking about it for sure. Which kind of works perfectly since I think both of us are very how would you say it? Like when we're into something, it's almost kind of like a little bit all consuming.
Mm,
It's like constantly on the mind. And so yeah, when when there's like a new set or something exciting coming up, we're kind of both just like very tuned in, and that's very much where our heads are at. So I think that it works pretty nicely for both of us in that regard. Neither of us are frustrated. We just kind of like to, I don't know. It's a lot of what we share. I guess it's a lot of a big part of our relationship. So yeah, no, I feel really lucky, and I wouldn't have it any other way, honestly.
I'm imagining a lot of kind of like home armories between you two, especially near new set releases, and that seems pretty magical from an avid Flesh and Blood player to another.
Yeah, we definitely play a fair bit. We talk about it and theorize and deck build and stuff even more. But yeah, there are certainly, it's funny, like sometimes more so than others. We play a lot, but I remember um leading when Heavy Hitters came out, I was visiting her and we played so much Victor and Kasai and KO into each other. And then I just took the deck that I've been playing with her and went to the Battle Harden and ended up winning that Battle Harden with KO, and that sort of became the KO deck. And it was just this like weird experience of like, this is just the deck I've been playing at home with my
Yeah.
partner, and we just been jamming games, and like now I won a tournament with it. It's sort of yeah, we had like proxy decks put together.
Right.
So it's funny how that works, but yeah, it is a lot of fun. So I feel very
Certainly
lucky
helps
to have her.
when your partner just happens to be a very honed blade in Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think yeah, obviously it's like I think it's a huge draw for both of us. It's something that we both enjoy and both appreciate, and there's a lot of things I appreciate about Ellie. She's yeah, just a very kind and caring person, and I think we get along in a lot of ways, but it is very nice to have that um passion for the game that we both share. Definitely feel lucky.
I want to turn to a less happy subject. You've expressed both recently and in the past that you can encounter bigotry sometimes in mainly in like the public sphere. I know I'm mainly referencing a on the Bauble podcast where you were talking about a kind of an uncomfortable interaction you had over in London. It's important to mention not in the venue or with any Flesh and Blood players, but
Yeah, yeah.
it makes me wonder: is the Flesh and Blood community a little bit better about making spaces that are more comfortable and accessible to everybody? And if so, how does that happen?
Yeah, I do think that Flesh and Blood is really good that way. The world is the way that it is, and not everybody is as accepting as you may like or wish, and that's just kind of how it is. No, I think it kind of doesn't matter who you are. Unfortunately, there's going to be somebody out there that doesn't like you for something that's probably not really within your control. Um, but but yeah, I think that Flesh and Blood overall has a pretty outstanding community. There's of course always going to be exceptions, especially as the community gets bigger, but by and large, things are fantastic. And I think a lot of that comes from James. Is
Mm,
sort of my take. I remember very early on. I've been playing Flesh and Blood since like Crucible era. I remember buying Crucible boxes like just as a regular, like first ed Crucible was just like a regular booster box that wasn't extra money or anything, just because that's when I was playing. um and anyways, I remember like going to the events and hearing James talk, because he's often at events, but especially the first ones he was always there. And just yeah, I think just really emphasizing the community and you know connecting with the other people playing in the Flesh and Blood, through the common language of playing great games and all of that. And I think that that really kind of resonates and shines through the community. And I think there's been a number of times where there have been little flare-ups of certain outspoken individuals in the community, and that's sort of been it's been made pretty clear, LSS's stance on that. And I think that that takes guts to do, but I do think it really fosters overall like a really good environment and a really good situation. And I think we see that with like um, think LSS is, or sorry, I think Flesh and Blood's community is just far more diverse than other trading card games, at least like from what I see on the outside, and especially in recent years. I remember very much like when I went to the first Pro Tour, there was not very many uh, women or LGBTQ folks, at least like visibly
Mm.
LGBTQ folks at the venue or there. But that's really different now. It's not, it's not an even split, but there is, yeah, there's a lot of women, there's a lot of queer folks out there, and I think that's really awesome. And I think that it's something that kind of feeds itself in a way where people talk to each other and people get their friends into it and they have good experiences that opens the door for other people. So yeah, it's really cool to see how the communities have been growing and how overall, yeah, the game is quite diverse and quite welcoming.
And if you have prime examples such as yourself of people that command the game and do really well and also thrive in it, then it's easier to see yourself doing the same thing. So kudos to you
Yeah.
for being one of those great examples.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and there's a few too. Like there's like Mara's out there as well. Ellie's out there. So yeah, I think it's nice to have that visibility, as you said. Yeah.
So you mentioned like a couple bad players in the Flesh and Blood community. Not necessarily. I don't think these are the ones you're talking about, but in the past you've also mentioned, especially before you kind of had this amount of clout, before you won Canadian Nationals and kind of became a household Flesh and Blood name, there could be some uncomfortable situations, sitting down at a table across from a stranger who either underestimates you or kind of assumes negative things about you, whatever. I wonder if you felt a particular shift once your, I don't know, fame, for lack of a better word, came into full focus and
Yeah.
you suddenly kind of had the power when you were sitting across from, a random round one opponent because they know who you are and they know how good of a player you are.
Yeah, there's definitely a huge shift, and I feel very privileged to be in the position that I am. But yeah, I think it's often people not. I think often it's not a matter of there being like ill intent on people's parts. It's just people being awkward or not knowing what to say or kind of like overcorrecting or just like trying to be welcoming, but in doing so being like a little patronizing or assuming that someone doesn't know what's going on just because like it's like, oh, there's this new girl playing, so that's so exciting. But they just kind of take it too far. It's like just be normal and then they would have a better time. So I've definitely like sat and witnessed that going on, and I try to, you know, um, alleviate that situation if I can in some way, diffuse it a little bit. That's definitely come up a couple times. But yeah, that's something that I definitely experienced in Magic and definitely experienced early on in Flesh and Blood, and I do not. Yeah, I would say I don't really get that anymore. So um, even though I know that other people do, so I don't think it's that it's been like removed from our community so much as because I am known that people don't make those assumptions and just kind of treat me as a peer. Which honestly, yeah, I feel very lucky to not have to deal with that, and I empathize with those that still do, because there are a lot of people that still do have to deal with those situations, and it's unfortunate, but it is the world we live in, and hopefully it's improving a little bit day by day. So yeah.
It's hard to not feel like it is, especially being a part of the community and loving it so much. But I'm very much interested in the equal opposite experience that you probably have nowadays. I'm thinking of, Yuki sits down, round one opponent in a calling. It's a player nobody's ever heard of, and then they're sitting across from somebody that they very much know. I tend to think that in these situations there are times where um, players almost like psych themselves out or lose to
Yeah.
themselves in a certain respect because they're like, I'm not beating Yuki Lee Bender, or like maybe some small part of their subconscious doesn't even want to, because they hold you up on a pedestal. Is that something that you've kind of ever detected?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know what exactly people are thinking, but I've definitely heard people, say to their friends or visibly be like kind of shaken, or even just say, "Oh no, I was hoping to not see a name that I knew," or something along these lines. Hoping not, I didn't want to sit down and have to face you, but it's an honor to meet you, kind of thing. I do get that kind of thing a little bit, so I can definitely see people being nervous, and I think that usually when you're nervous, it doesn't necessarily help you play better. So yeah, it's always hard to tell, like, if I haven't played with somebody, if they're playing worse or if they're making more mistakes than they normally would. But I definitely do notice some people being um, intimidated or potentially a little bit starstruck at times, and probably does play into my favor at least a little bit, I would have to imagine. But I can't think of like specific instances where I know I can be like, this mistake was because of this, because it's kind of hard to, can't really draw like causality there, I guess.
If
Yeah.
you were coaching somebody who has this as a known issue, or perhaps if you can access the ways in which you overcame it, because I'm sure you had to early on in your flesh and blood career, how would you do it?
I would just remind yourself that they're playing the same game as you and they play by the same rules, and they don't get like some special move or something that they got to
Mm.
do. They're just playing flesh and blood, and you're also playing flesh and blood, and just don't overthink it. Play the best that you can and focus on playing your game, and that's kind of it. I think like one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they go, "Oh, I'm playing whoever, and what I normally do is not going to beat them, so I need to do something
Mm.
like different, or I need to mix it up or surprise them." And usually doing something you've never practiced, there's spots for it if you have a really good reason, but if it's just because you're intimidated by the other person, then you're completely going off your game, it's probably not going to serve you the best. You should just do what you practiced, try your best, try to execute on that, and just remember, like, you're playing a card game. Anything can happen. If you play well, you can absolutely get there. But um, being nervous and changing things up last minute because you're nervous doesn't help you. It doesn't help you get there. So it's not really, it's like a very human thing to do, but it's not a useful reaction to have, I guess, in terms of like the outcome or the, yeah.
Yuki, I've taken a stroll through your Twitter account, and one of the things that stand out to me is that you are, besides how much you love food, obviously, and travel, is that you are incredibly candid, not only about your your victories, but your defeats as well. And not only do you not hide them from your public profile, you are also very upfront with how you're feeling at times of intense loss in competition, and the ways that you kind of approach dealing with it. Was this a conscious choice when you started kind of posting more consistently, or is this something that just happened fairly naturally?
Yeah, I think that so one thing that bugs me about social media in general is I think people have this tendency to kind of post, it's like the highlights,
Mm-hmm.
right? They show all the travel photos of the wonderful places they've been. They show all the nice food, and if they win a tournament, you'll see it on there for sure, but if they don't, they won't. And so you kind of get this like feedback effect where it's like ProQuest, and you scroll through Twitter, and it's like, oh, I won my ProQuest. Oh, I 3-0'd I won 3 ProQuest this season. Oh, I won 4 ProQuest this season. And it's kind of like all you see. Or even at pre-release, I remember seeing this, people being, oh, I went 18-0 over all my pre-releases, and that's kind of all you see, because you don't see the people that are, well, like, I went like 3-15. Like, people aren't posting about that, and I think that that's kind of a shame, because I think it can make people feel bad, and I kind of like just being like, yep, this is how things are going, and sometimes that's really good and sometimes that's not good, but I think that it feels, um I really value being authentic, I guess, and both as like an individual and also like in people I interact with, I really value them being authentic with me, so I like to hold myself to that standard, and I think that that's like kind of part of it for me, is that um, I kind of want to just say how things are going. And if it's going well, fantastic. And if it's not going well, like, that's life too. And it's important for people to kind of see that. I think everybody has bad events, and it's easy to beat yourself up over it. And I mean, I don't know. Even the greatest players, I'm not going to name names, but even the greatest players like don't day two pro tours
Mm-hmm.
and have a bunch of losses and just drop. And then that happens. I know several people at London that are fantastic players that have topped all kinds of events that just were nowhere anywhere on the standings at all in London. And that's just how it goes. And I think that it's important for us to like remember that like tournaments make a lot of losers. There's this one person that
Mm-hmm.
wins and there's a lot of people that lose, and it's okay to lose. And I think that's part of it. So yeah.
I think it's such an important expression of vulnerability, not only for whatever you get out of it, but also for the community at large, because not only is social media kind of a cesspool for this exact kind of behavior, the winning complex, and if you are not a part of that whirlwind, then you are a part of the loser complex, and that's not a healthy
Yeah.
perspective. But also because broadcast doesn't show the losers by and large. Like the closest thing we show is like win and ins, so people who are on the
Mm-hmm.
brink of glory or whatever. And so, at least personally, when I was first viewing professional Flesh and Blood tournaments, it was like, oh, I can totally do this. I can get in there. I can, win X number of rounds in a row. What I didn't see was the fatigue over the course of 9 hours of card games, the lack of food sometimes, the crushing moments that just don't get out of your head and make unforced errors throughout the day. So I don't know. I guess the reason for going on that diatribe is to personally thank you for accessing that vulnerability and being a voice for the losers in the room, because all of us are going to be that one day or another.
Oh, thank you. That means a lot for me. It's not really something that I like necessarily like talk about or advertise, but it's something that yeah, it is intentional. It's something I have thought about, and it is. I think for me, like I would rather not engage at all than not engage in a like if I'm gonna engage, I want it to feel authentic rather than or not at all. I don't want to engage in this like kind of like just picking the highlights kind of way. So yeah.
So Yuki, whenever you are on coverage, you exude kind of a statuesque confidence. Your body language gives almost nothing away. Uh, are you? It makes me wonder: are you actually that calm and collected when you're sitting on a feature match, or is that something that you kind of can just control and send outwardly?
It depends. There's spots where I am definitely really nervous. I think it will depend a lot on the stakes and maybe the state of the game too. Um, I'm sure you know what I mean. There's spots in the game where you get nervous and you're like, oh, I really hope my opponent doesn't have this. So I definitely have those moments. But by and large, I try to stay pretty level-headed when I'm playing. Um, I don't know. I think that generally like those emotions, that nervousness, that lack of confidence can kind of really seep in and kind of taint your decision making. So I
Mm.
try to kind of set that aside while I'm playing. And in terms of being on feature match compared to just being at a table anywhere else in the room, uh, for whatever reason, it doesn't feel that different to me. Maybe some of it is a matter of I don't know, having done it before. Teaching, I'm in front of people all the time.
Mm.
I don't know. Yeah, for whatever reason, I kind of am able to kind of turn off that extra pressure of being on feature. And I don't know if it was like that for me, like the first time I was on feature. I think I was a little bit more nervous. So I think there's definitely some amount of just like, yep, I've done this before, business as usual. Or it's like it's not a new experience, so it's not as intimidating. But also some of it is just I don't know. You're still playing Flesh and Blood, and for me, it's kind of in a similar vein to that not getting nervous about who you're playing against, but also
Mm.
not getting nervous where you're playing. Like it's still kind of different settings, different opponents, but still the same activity and still the same game. And just kind of trying to really focus on being in the moment. I think usually if I get nervous, I try to turn that nervousness into focus on the game and kind of taking things one step at a time, one play at a time, just recentering and going from there. And so yeah, I do get nervous for sure, but I try to turn that into like if I feel that seeping into my mental, I try and intentionally pause, take a moment, and refocus, and try to get those kind of negative thoughts out. And that's something that I can unpack and think about later. I think I can be quite emotional about games like afterwards when I'm,
Mm.
especially if I've made mistakes and I'm reviewing it. But um, actually, Brian Gottlieb, before when he was doing a lot of Magic content, had a podcast called Head Games where he did a whole bunch of like like the mental side of playing card games. It's really it's a great podcast. I'd recommend checking it out if that's something that interests you. But one of the things that he said that really stuck with me is like, this is just like not helpful right now. Like I can be upset about this, but like that's not going to help me win this game.
Mm.
And so I should be upset about it later when I have the time to like think about it and process it and reflect on it. But like right now I'm trying to win this game, and maybe I made a mistake or maybe things didn't go my way, but thinking about how unlucky I was or thinking about that mistake's not gonna it's not gonna fix anything. So let's try and focus on what I can focus on what I can control and kind of go one step at a time.
So what I'm hearing is that it maybe took a combination of repetition and also some conscious strategies, some change in the way you approach it in order to kind of overcome this.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's to some degree a learned skill. I guess the other thing that comes to mind is I used to play baseball when I was a pitcher. And that's very much
Very
something where
nerve-wracking position, right?
nerve wracking. People can steal bases. You make a bad pitch. You can't get upset. You
Mm.
can't like let your attention wander. You need to be able to have that under wraps. And for me, it's like kind of it feels similar in card games. Maybe not as much. You have more time to think. Like there's no it's not happening like real time. You have turns and you can actually stop and pause. So you do get a little bit of a bit of reprieve if you need it in card games, but a similar thing of needing to stay focused, stay centered, and stay in the moment. And I think that it's hard. It is honestly a hard thing, but I also think it's something that we can all learn and get better at. And there's lots of skills associated with this. And I think that if this is something you want to get better at, I'd encourage you to read about it, think about it, learn about it, because there is a lot of there's research on this kind of stuff, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of that. So, yeah.
Let's turn to some of the more invigorating and positive emotions in card games. Um, I think it's something that a lot of us can access, but maybe in different ways. So I think the question that boils it all down is: do you feel the most you when you are competing in Flesh and Blood?
It's hard to say. In some ways, yeah. I think that, I mean, in some ways, it's like a similar appeal that I have for skiing that we were talking about earlier, where you're in the moment, you're kind of in that like flow state, and um, I'm the kind of person where there's always things rushing through my head. I cannot stop thinking about things constantly. I'm just constantly worrying, trying to trying to minimize this, maximize that, like to a fault for sure.
Mm.
But just being able to be in the moment and focus so intensely on something, I find very rewarding and very kind of like meditative. And I feel that in skiing, I feel that in card games, and yeah, I guess it is an expression of who I am and the things that I love. I don't know if it's the most me. I feel like there's like different. We're multifaceted, and I have multiple passions, but I do think that it is a very important part of who I am. And like gaming and competition has always been something important to me. So in a way, before, like, I think growing up it was a lot of video games and things like this, and so it's a little bit different, but it's definitely scratching that itch, and it feels very, I don't know, it feels like, what's the word? It's like things that I aspired to do when I was little, and I'm able to do them now in a way. So yeah, I guess I do feel very myself and very alive when I'm playing tournaments. So I think that's part of why I travel so much.
Maybe it's a little dramatic, but the words fruition and destiny come to mind when I hear you talk about that, kind of like the culmination of little Yuki into big Yuki.
A little bit. It's kind of funny because like I was really like into competitive video games and all of that growing up, and sometime around like college, I kind of gave up. Like it's just too hard. I still played, still had fun, but it was like, yeah, this is not what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go get a job, do all this other stuff, and then I had this hobby on the side, and it started going really well, and now I'm here, and it's not something that I thought. I kind of thought that, like, I kind of like thought I closed that chapter in my life, and that was
Mm-hmm.
kind of gone, and it's weird to have stumbled back into it and have it now be sort of what I do. I feel yeah, I feel very, very lucky and very, very fortunate to have this turn of events. I guess it's yeah, it's very special.
I identify that with that very closely. I think for super similar reasons that that gap where you are putting down the things that kind of gave you joy when you were younger, or the things that seem almost frivolous in a way, when you focus on your career, and then it comes back around full circle. It almost feels dreamlike in a certain way, almost
Yeah,
like it's a state of being that shouldn't exist, or one that we were maybe told would never exist when we were younger in a certain respect.
yeah, yeah, definitely. It's like you kind of dream of it, and then it's like, well, at some point you get hit with the reality of like, well, that's not going to happen. Um, and it's tough because I think that there's definitely times where you need to recognize that, and you need to kind of grapple with that, and you need to accept that, and that's hard. But it's funny how things can also come back around, and um, yeah, it's not like because you stopped at that one point in time that you won't ever have anything similar come up. Um, so yeah, it's funny how things work out that way.
All right. Well, I guess we should talk about Flesh and Blood now. But thanks for opening a window into the life of Yuki Lee Bender. Um, are you familiar with the tradition of senior superlatives? Did they do that in Canada?
I don't think so. I've
It's
heard, like, I recognize the phrase, but I couldn't tell you what it is.
it's like in the yearbook, students vote who has the best smile, who is most likely to succeed,
Mhm.
XYZ. The reason
Okay,
I
yeah.
bring it up is because I think if I were to apply a senior superlative to Yuki Lee Bender, it would be the top. I mean, myself and probably the top of other people's lists for like most likely to dominate a new meta. And to back this up, I'd like to mention your win, which you already alluded to on KO, at Battle Hardened Hartford during the beginning days of the heavy hitter meta, your 6-0 Florian list from a PQ Plus in Houston at the beginning of the Rosetta meta, the Syndra list that you pioneered and in the hands of Brody Spurlock took down, calling Memphis, and then now most recently your top 8 at the world premiere in Taipei. Would you say that the unknown is your comfort zone?
I think so. I think that one of the things that I've kind of picked up over time, like from school and from everything, is a very good ability to learn. I think I'm a fast learner. I think I'm able to pick things up, make connections, and do that very quickly and adapt quite quickly. So I think that is definitely, I don't know where that comes from, but I do think that is a skill set that I have, and a strength of mine is that um, things feel like they come together quickly, and it's not everything. Like in High Seas Limited, for example, I still cannot really figure out Puffin.
Mm.
So I definitely get stuck on things, but there are I would say that there's things that come together and make sense to me. And in heavy hitters, I was KO. I was kind of drawn to KO, and KO sort of made sense to me. And that didn't mean that I figured out every CC deck, but at least the KO deck was able to figure out. And sort of a similar thing, being drawn to Florian or being drawn to Syndra. There's like a inspiration there where I kind of see something and can kind of see how it fits together. And I kind of view that as well as like those early CC things being like a deck building exercise. And I also think limited in general, but especially early in the format, is very much a deck building exercise where um, having a better understanding of what the hero should look like or can look like is a really big advantage. It's sort of like if you're drafting a deck, you need to be able to know what that deck is going to look like at the end in order to get there. And so in a lot of ways, I think that draft has a whole bunch of different skill sets. There's gameplay, there's a draft process, there's all these things. But I think that the deck building part is really, really important. And I think it's something that I would say comes naturally to me. And I do think I tend to do better in early formats rather than later formats. Most of my Canadian nationals that I won, I played a Lexi deck that people hadn't seen that beat up on the Briar deck, and it was
Mm.
very much an edge through deck building. And I think that I think there's probably other players that, given months of preparation, are maybe better at just squeezing out those last couple of percentage points. I think that I'm not bad at that. I can do that. There's decks I have done well with where they've been around for a long time and I have a very high level of mastery. But I think more than anything, I'm good at sort of like figuring things out, making connections, and that like early deck building kind of stage, I think, is my probably my greatest strength in card games, I would say.
I would dare say that, especially when we are looking at the way that LSS is handling some of these higher tier events and product releases, looking at you, US Nationals, this coming weekend where we have a product release, the majority of Flesh and Blood players would probably trade skill sets with you if they could, and they also tend to find comfort. I'm including myself in this bubble. They feel comfort in letting other people kind of figure out the meta, figure out the first draft of a deck list. Is there a way to learn how to be more comfortable with the unknown and new metas? Is there a window into your process that you can give us that might help people at home who want to improve this skill?
um yeah, I think some of it is just practice, doing it a lot. I love building decks. I build decks all the time, repeatedly over and over again. I'll keep iterating on decks and just doing that. And um, I think that that has to be a big part of it, both to get better at it, but also just because you're not going to get it right the first time.
Mm.
I don't think it matters who you are. Your first draft of a deck is probably not going to be much good, or at least not as close to optimal as it could be. There's going to be lots of rooms for refinement and changes and shifts. So it's okay to, I think it's actually like not even just okay, it's part of the process to be wrong and to make mistakes. Your first draft is never going to be perfect, and you need to be willing to kind of, I think, be really honest with yourself about what are the things that worked well, what are the things that didn't work well, and kind of latch onto those things that feel good and when you're playing the deck, and those things that don't. Like, um, I have these like card evaluation things that I go off of that people kind of laugh about because they're like, oh, that sounds so silly. But I think it's really true that when I'm playing a deck, if I'm just like, often I might not even play games early. I'll just draw hands and see how they feel,
Mm.
and see do they play well. And if there's a card when I draw it and I'm like, this card's so bad in this hand, and then I draw it 2, 3, 4, 5 more times, this card's still so bad in my hand. It either has to be doing something really broken on all the other turns, or I'm getting it out of my deck because it's
Mm.
just like this doesn't belong here. This doesn't feel good. This card, like every time I see this card, I'm miserable. And similarly, if there's a card where you're going, oh, I really wish I could draw this card. It's probably a really good card. That's probably a key card, and I might look at if there's similar cards to that. So I think listening to yourself and paying attention to how you feel when you see those cards is really important because I think you're a pretty good gauge for that. Like if there's a card like where half the time you draw, you're just like, why is this in my hand? Like maybe the answer is just like don't have it in your deck. And
Mm.
I think so much of my early deck building is about trying to just have decks feel very smooth, be very uh like not too fancy, I guess
Mm.
is the way I would describe it. Just like let's do something that's consistent, that's pretty straightforward, and we're going to do it over and over and over again. Whether that's, for KO, we're getting an agility and we're going to go 2 for 6 into claw into 2 for 6. And it's like what the deck's going to do. And sometimes you go 2 for 6, tunic, 2 for 6. And it's like the whole thing that the deck does. And then that's all the deck's going to do. And is this the best KO deck? I don't know. Maybe not. But it's going to do something that's pretty good. And I kind of felt like that with Florian too. It's like, so the best thing we have is Grasp Reaping Blade and these like decompose cards like um, Felling of the Crown, incredible card. Let's just maximize those cards and make the most of them and try to get some value out of Florian's hero ability and get there with as much life as possible. Because I was noticing if I was at 10 life when I get Florian online, it's really hard to win a game. And if I'm at 30 life when Florian's online, it's really easy. So that sort of like shaped a lot of like, well, we need good blocks, we need defense reactions, we need blah blah blah. So yeah, I think just sort of like, I guess my big piece of the big takeaways to summarize would be pay attention to your feelings when you are drawing up cards. If they're feeling bad, they're probably bad. And if they're feeling great, they're probably great. And it's okay to kind of go off of that and tweak that and pay attention to that. And especially in limited, but even in CC, just like don't get too fancy, don't get too cute with it. If you have this really convoluted thing that you think is gonna, well, I get this card and this card and this card in exactly this game state, and I have this awesome pitch stack, and then I can win. It's like, okay, that's too many steps already. Like I want it to be like 1 or 2 steps. And as soon as people like, that's like the other thing. Like as soon as people are like, oh, we can win by pitch stacking this, and this, and it's like 3 reds in there, I'm just like, nah, this is like, forget about it. It's not gonna work. Like it's just, if they're 3 blues, sure, but yeah, I think people get a little bit too fancy, just Fab's really mathy. Just do the boring stuff. It's usually pretty good.
You're making me think of a very specific teammate who I won't mention at the moment. In regards to the pitch stacking hilarity fancy thing, there's a couple things I want to unpack with what you said. All of it was fantastic, but number one, your card evaluation thingies is that a specific like personal list of criteria where if X card meets them, they remain in the deck. If they don't, they're out. What do you mean by that?
I guess I just meant like that. I guess there's like some. So I guess when I'm evaluating cards, like some of it is like the raw numbers on the card and seeing if the numbers are good compared to like kind of the benchmarks. Like we have like I don't know, the classic like Raging Onslaught stat line, the Brutal Assault stat line, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And if things are 1 or 2 points above that, they're usually very good. So I'll try to include those cards. Like just play the good cards is like a big philosophy of mine. And then the other part I was referring to was just the how the cards feel when you draw them. Um, if a card frustrates me and when I draw it, I get it out of my deck. Like there are people like, oh, but this card's so cool. I'm like, yeah, but I hate it. Every time I draw it, I'm upset. And then so I just get it out of my deck. I don't want it in there. And if there's a card I love, then I might try to play more of them or play a similar effect. And I put a lot of weight into that. And related to this is like, this is maybe best for like sideboard pieces or on hits, but if I'm play testing a card, like Lexi had a lot of this. I'd be like, so which arrow makes you more sad here, this one or this one? And like that's like a big thing for me, is just like, does it feel really bad? Because if it feels really bad, that probably means it's doing something powerful. And then like it sounds really silly, but I think our gut reaction to things is usually pretty spot on, and
Mm.
sometimes it's off. Like sometimes things feel bad and they're not as bad as they feel. I don't know if I can think of. I think like New sometimes has this where she can like tear your whole turn apart and then be like, oh, but I did like 3 damage.
Right.
um, so it's definitely not like 100% of the time, but I think a good percentage of the time, if something feels good, it's probably good. If something feels bad for the opponent, it's probably good for you and bad for them. And if something feels bad when you're playing it or drawing it, it's probably bad. So just like go with that. You don't have to. It could be the surrounding pieces. Like sometimes it's a matter of that card not having support, but often it's just a matter of
Mm.
it's an indication of either that card doesn't fit what you're trying to do or that card is just not good at all.
It sounds like you're
If that
trying
makes sense.
to instill the age-old strategy of being in tune with yourself.
I
It's
guess
as simple as
so.
that, I
It's
guess.
I guess so. I just think that like the best decks when you play them have very low friction. Like
Mm.
if you play like Michael Hamilton's lists, I think that they very much have this quality of being consistent, redundant, pretty straightforwards, like in a good way. Just like
Mm-hmm.
we do this thing, it does it over and over again. It has really good numbers. It's hard for people to deal with, and that's what our deck does. And it's just like very focused, very kind of like singular. And yeah, I think that that's important in a deck. And when you have too many moving parts going in too many directions, it usually just doesn't really work out. And I guess like I'm trying to describe kind of like the feeling associated with that. Um I think that deck building there's like math, there's rules, there's all kinds of stuff, but I think a lot of it is also there's a lot of like art to it. And I think how, for me at least, how a deck feels is super important. I want the deck to feel like very, very smooth. All the hands function, everything works. I can always convert my hands. Those are things that I always look for. And so paying attention to those like cards that stand out like a sore thumb when you draw them and you're just like,
Mm.
oh, this is so bad. I wish this was any other card in my deck. It's like, well, yeah, just get it out.
The second thing I wanted to call back to is the fact that one of your major philosophies early on in deck building is just play the good cards, which I almost wonder if maybe not pigeonholes, but kind of rudders you towards a very specific kind of deck. I mean, like when I think of, for example, KO and Florian, even though people will say they're doing a very different thing, like Florian wants to play a longer game, KO wants to play a shorter game, perhaps, they're still playing numbers. They're still very much trying to do a very consistent thing. And that is very different than, say, a prism deck. Even though it's doing a consistent thing, it is sort of like playing on this high roll kind of maybe adrenaline junkie kind of vibe in a certain respect. Kano is probably the best example of this phenomenon. So I wonder if that precludes you to a very specific type of deck, especially in an early meta. Like, do you feel like you have safety nets on either side of you, or of what draws your attention?
Um, I think I do tend to gravitate towards kind of like the value piles or just like the efficient decks. Like I just like raw efficiency does tend to appeal to me. Um, I would say that a deck like Kano is probably not in my wheelhouse as far as deck building goes. But I also think that uh, I think that Flesh and Blood is still a really mathy game, and most of these Kano's maybe like the biggest exception, but most of these decks do come down to value and math. For example, I've been putting a lot of work into Gravy Bones. You will see Gravy Bones content for me. I won't talk too much about it, but you're going to see Gravy Bones content from me very soon. And yeah, like that's maybe because it's like a board state deck, you could say it's not mathy, but I think at the end of the day, if you're creative enough with the framework, you can sort of see, well, this is my output, then they have to clear my ally, and here's how much they spend on this ally, and it still does kind of boil down to math. And yes, there's some of the if the ally sticks, it can get even more value. But I think
Mm.
ultimately it is very mathy, and I think like Enigma was a great example of this, especially as the hero developed. Um, yeah, it's a board state deck. Yeah, it's an illusionist. It just had really good numbers. That's why
Mm-hmm.
it was such a damn good deck. Was that it just did really good numbers, and then once or twice in the game it said, "Can you beat this?" And if you can't, you just lose.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, I think that ultimately like most flesh and blood decks do have math and value as sort of like a foundation, and there's only like very very few exceptions. So yeah, I do have a style deck that I lean towards, but I don't think that the approach is necessarily like too limited. Like I think the same approach kind of like applies to Dash.io, for
Mm.
example, which is like quite a different style of deck. So I think most decks you can kind of like build in this way. um Maybe the like true combo decks like Kano are a little bit of a different beast, but yeah.
Your mention of Enigma makes me think very much about how refined those lists were towards the end when she reached Living Legend. I mean, they were like maybe one or two cards apart, it felt like, at the top
Mhm.
tables. I mean, everyone was doing the 3 card 9, or excuse me, the 2 card 9. Everybody was doing the tunic counter 7. And of course, Manifestations of Miragai is just a fat value engine when it gets rolling. That makes me wonder about your philosophy about classes in general. Is there a a perfect 80 for each class, or is there or each build of a specific hero, or is there more nuance to it? Are there two 80s of a deck that are trying to do the same thing, that are created equal, that can equally top a pro tour, or are we all striving for the exact same thing? It's just when we reach it.
um so I think it depends a little bit. What I'll say is that the ideal 80 is going to shift over time for starters,
Mm,
depending on the metagame that it's in. And I think that in terms of like for a specific event, for a specific pro tour, there are times where you see lists that are very, I guess, like homogenized. They're very similar. There's a lot of there's like a lot of agreement or a lot of consensus on what those decks should look like, and that does happen. But very often I think that there's also quite a bit of room to make maybe not like huge shifts. I don't think you're reinventing the wheel,
mm.
but different blues, different sideboard options, things like this. There's absolutely room to do that, and I think that will come down to um, what you expect to show up, which matchups you want points into. I often describe it this way as like you can include warmongers to get points into Azalea, or you can include, I don't know, some other blue for some other matchup,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very much like trading off win percentage in one matchup for another. And I guess in a sense maybe there's like a correct answer based on what shows up to that event, and part of that's like your meta prediction. But I think another important aspect of it is I guess like your game plans and your comfort level into those matchups, because people have different opinions on matchups all the time. Like some people will be like, "Oh, this matchup feels really favored for me," or "This matchup feels less favored for me." And I think that it is possible. Flesh and Blood's like a very fascinating game where I think like the both the build of the deck as well as the approach that you take can really vary how the matchup plays and what the win percentage in the matchup is. And you have these bizarre matchups like Oldhim Dromai, where both sides believe they're super favored, and it's just because there's so many levels and so many
Mm.
iterations to it. And so I think that sometimes in those types of spots, there's room for, I guess, differences in deck building that match your game plan and match your understanding of that matchup. And trying to think of an example, but I know there are spots where I've chosen to tech less for a matchup because I'm very confident in it. I'm just like
Mm.
I don't need extra points into this matchup. I feel like I think Lexi into Icelander was just like a matchup where it's like I understand both these decks. I think Lexi is unbelievably favored into Icelander. I don't need extra blues and extra whatever for Icelander. It just doesn't matter. Like I'm gonna be so favored into Icelander, it doesn't matter. So I'm gonna spend those sideboard slots on something else. So I do think that there's room to tweak based on your understanding of the matchup, your comfort level of the matchup, and then also what you expect to play against and what you want to have points on. There's also some philosophy, like some people want to have like the best matchup they can into the best deck, and that's like one way of approaching it.
Mm.
Other people want to have like the the least negative matchups possible, if that makes sense. Like if there's like if there was a deck that was like 51% into everything, like that's like the perfect deck. That's
Mm-hmm.
what they want. They don't want the like you have like 70 percenters and you have 20 percenters. They're not interested in that. So I think there's also some different philosophies, and that can shape your deck building. It can shape your deck choice, but it can also shape your deck building to some degree. Like, do you sack the Kano matchup, or do you tech harder for that Kano matchup, and things like that.
Yuki, last season you joined the Armory. It's just another Flesh and Blood team, but it happens to involve some of the winningest names in the game. And before its debut at Pro Tour London, it was maybe the closest thing we had to like an elite secretive cabal, if I can call it that, in Flesh and Blood. What was it like testing with the new super team?
It was fascinating. I learned a lot. Um, so the funny thing is that I don't think the things that I got out of it are necessarily what people would think that I get out of it. Um, the biggest things that I learned were from Simon Nielsen, who was running that team, who is an incredible Magic the Gathering player and also a fantastic Flesh and Blood player, but really just like at the top level for Magic the Gathering, like easily one of the best players in the world. And the biggest things I learned were around um, communication, sharing information within the team, structure, organization, all of that kind of stuff. Like the procedural process driven stuff
Mm,
was just so good and so interesting, and I think that that was the thing that stood out to me, honestly, more than anything. Obviously the games were very high quality, the players were fantastic. That goes without saying, but honestly, um I noticed the difference in game quality less than I noticed the difference in just communication, sharing
mm.
information, people helping each other out, and just all of those kind of processes. So it was a really good experience. I learned a lot, and that I believe many of those people are still testing together. I'm sort of going back to my old testing group, which is just a lot of friends, to be honest, because I really value those social connections. So I'm sticking with them, but definitely going to be taking some of those learnings and things that I picked up in terms of how to communicate, how to organize ourselves, how to test and practice, and make sure everybody's getting the most out of the team. I think those are things that are gonna. I'm really excited to see how they work for us going forward, because I think that they're just so important.
That group is, of course, Team Stroopwafel, which we have to shout out
Yeah,
here because they're awesome, and a couple of them are AG locals. Zane Johnson, looking at you,
yeah,
buddy. Hope to see you again soon. We've been missing you lately. Um,
yeah.
in the past, you have taken the stance that being open to the community about what you're working on is better than holding it close to the chest, and you've preached this as a philosophy for two reasons. One, um, because it not only like breeds mistrust with the community, but also number two, the secret tech that you're guarding might not actually be that secret and might have an answer out there. So you're maybe hamstringing yourself by keeping it under wraps. Part of the philosophy, at least from the words on the street of the Armory, was ultimate secrecy within the team, not letting anything get out. Do you feel did you feel like a testing with that team was almost kind of flying in the face of that philosophy about openness?
Yeah, I was willing to try it as a different approach. I would say that it definitely felt a little challenging to navigate for me, partially because of my job, which is content creation,
Mm,
and coaching. But content creation is a huge part of it, so that's always a little bit tricky. And also just sort of like I like sharing things. I believe in sharing things. I believe in just being well tested and being upfront and honest. And I don't really yeah, it just doesn't really align with my worldview, I guess. um but but yeah, so I found it a little bit challenging. I wonder how much I should say here. I know that I believe that they're planning to be much more open going forward. So I
mm,
think that that's something that's like shifted, and was very much like yeah, different people. I think it's like a very like old school TCG um kind of idea. Like there's this idea in TCGs that like if you hide information, that's super valuable, and I think that that's true in some spots, probably even more true in Magic the Gathering, and I think maybe a little less true in Flesh and Blood, where I guess like we were touching on earlier, the game plans, the way you play the cards is often as important or more important than the specific list of cards that you're playing. And yeah. Um, yeah, it's quite fascinating. Like I feel like matchups can vary really wildly just based on like understanding, even with like the same decks. Whereas in it, I feel like in some other games, it's very like this deck is
mm,
favored into this deck or it's not. Whereas in Flesh and Blood, it can be like, well, it kind of depends who the two pilots are. Like one of them will be favored
mm.
into the other. There are matchups that are just like, of course, like very everybody knows the way that it goes. But I do think there are ones with like a lot of room for different ideas about how the matchup plays, and I think because of that, that just like being secret about the list doesn't get you that far. And I think a lot of people's lists ends up being uh, like you said, all the Enigma lists were pretty close by the time we got to the Pro Tour. I think with Talishar, with the amount of games everybody's getting, with the information getting better, um, you're just so unlikely to have a big edge in deck building. And I guess if you do have that secret, it's probably pretty easy to keep it because you probably really know that you have it. Like if you,
Mm.
I don't know, if you have a deck that's on no one's radar, then yeah, you probably should keep it a secret. But it's also easy enough to keep that a secret if you really need to, and you don't have to be that way about everything. There's not that many wounded bull Icelanders or whatever it is, or you where you truly have something novel. It does happen, but it's pretty rare.
Is that quality of Flesh and Blood the emphasis on how you pilot the deck rather than the specific cards that you bring to an event? Is that part of what captured your attention and maybe siphoned you off from Magic the Gathering to this game?
Um, I don't know about initially. I think I was sort of like losing interest in Magic, and Flesh and Blood was just like very resonant and fun. Like resonant, like the classes felt like the classes.
Mm,
The Rangers felt like a Ranger. The Wizard feels like a Wizard. The Guardian feels like a Guardian. They do a great job of that, and I think that's a lot of what drew me in, at least initially. But I do think it's part of what has maybe captivated me or made me stay and be so focused on it.
mm,
Um, I feel not in all matchups, but I feel like there's a lot of matchups where um, it's almost like a battle of not ideals, but just a battle of like, I think this goes this way, and I think this is what the matchup's about, and someone else going, no, I think it's about this, and you sort of see who is right about that. Like Icelander Oldham is like a perfect example of this, where you have people playing it like a value battle and trying to win that way. You have people playing it as a fatigue battle and trying to, attrition out the Icelanders. And there was all these kind of different approaches. And it was very much about understanding what the other player was doing if they shifted from one strategy to another and how you're supposed to respond to them making a shift. And if
Mm.
you could do all of that, my opinion was that it was really good for Icelander, like almost unlosable. But it was very much a matter of like needing to see all the shifts, needing to understand everything that they're doing, needing to adapt everything. And I don't think most players agree on exactly who is favored in that matchup or the best approach or you know whatever. And there's some other matchups like this, but yeah, it feels very much like a battle of like the knowledge or understanding of how we're gonna play.
So maybe it's the allure of an unanswerable question in certain respects.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I also think it's interesting to like you do all this study, you do all this practice, and you're like, this is the answer.
Mm.
And other people have been doing the same thing. And then you don't really know until you get to the table and you play the game. Do you know what I mean? Like, especially at the pro tours, it's like we've all been practicing for so long. We all have these different ideas about what works, what doesn't work, what's optimal, what's, you know, how to get advantages. And you kind of get to see that all play out in real time. Of course, there's variance as a card game. It's not perfect, but yeah, I think that's one of the things that really intrigues me is the way that different people. It's like a problem solving exercise. I really like problem solving, so I think that's really interesting.
Yuki, there's a time in Flesh and Blood history that is equally, I think, equally momentous to us, but maybe it's more heavily weighted on your side because I'm talking about the moment that Lexi Livewire hit Living Legend. This was a deck and a hero that kind of solidified you as maybe the person that is most comfortable in the unknown. You brought her to PT New Jersey at a time where she was very much not on a lot of people's radar, and you performed admirably well. And then tack on X events after that, where you were the front runner of the Lexi crew. Can you talk about what that moment meant to you, and maybe what the deck meant to, or what the hero meant to you?
Yeah, Lexi was the deck that no matter what the meta was, I would always go back to. There was a long time, so I think everybody remembers Lexi being like the best deck and how dominant she was and how sick of her everyone was.
But she was
But there
not
was a
always
long
that way.
time. No, there was a long time where she was not that good, and she was sort of like you could target certain things, you could do certain things very well, but you had your problems. And it was very like an anti-meta kind of deck, and it was the deck that I would always go back to, and I would
Mm,
build a million different ways. I I tried, you know, lots of fusing, a little bit of fusing. Can we do a hybrid list? Can we do this or that? All can we do a list that switches between lightning and ice, and you know, just all kinds of different builds. Can you do a death dealer build? Just endless possibilities with that deck, and yeah, I kind of miss having a deck that I just enjoyed so much that I would just wanted to explore like every possible permutation is what it felt like.
yeah.
Yeah, I kind of miss having that. So it was sad to see her go. But I think she had a good run, and I
Mm-hmm.
think that I got to play a lot of different versions of that deck, and I really enjoyed it. At the time, I remember being like, well, I still have Icelander. I love Icelander. And she went shortly after. So I think once both of them were gone, I felt definitely a little bit aimless. I think I still feel a little bit aimless in terms of decks.
Mm.
Maybe Gravy Bones. Gravy Bones is actually really fun. This is like maybe the most fun I've had since those heroes. We'll see. We'll see how I feel a few weeks from now or whatever, a few months from now. But so far, Gravy Bones is really intriguing. So maybe there'll be another hero that grabs me in that way. But I do, yeah, I do miss Lexi. I do miss that hero, and in many ways, it was sort of like I don't know. I played it because I thought it had a good matchup into Briar, and I wasn't like the most competitive player, but I was like, I don't know, I'll just play this deck that beats up on the best deck, and maybe I'll get lucky. And that's how I won nationals. And I guess that sort of started everything for me. That started
Mm.
making content, that started doing podcasts, that started going to more events, that started going to pro tours, and that started being like kind of where I am. So in a lot of ways, Lexi was sort of like the hero that got me there. So yeah, I do miss her.
So it sounds like there's a little bit of pain behind letting her go in certain respects. I wonder, though, as painful as it is to let one of your cherished heroes go, as so many of us have done in this game, is there, at least in the immediate aftermath, is there a certain amount of liberation that comes from, I don't know, maybe being relinquished from like leaning on a comfort pick, um, and maybe opening yourself up to the world of Wraith a little bit more now that your ride or die is gone?
Yeah, I definitely think I've grown quite a lot as a player. Since Lexi and Icelander LL'd, I've played so many different heroes. I think people often kind of saw me as a bit of a specialist for a long time, which I think is a pretty fair assessment.
Mm.
I definitely was, and I've become much more of a I'll play whatever I think is good. So, so yeah, I think I learned a lot and grew as a player, and it, yeah, it's good to be a specialist. I think, especially when you're starting out. Um, it's like a great way to interface with the game because it's kind of the game is just so big. You can't learn everything. And I think kind of diving deep into one hero and then picking up a second hero, then a third hero was kind of very much my approach. And yeah, it's sad to see the one I was most comfortable with and the one I was, in many ways enjoyed the most be no longer legal in classic constructed. But it's good to branch out. It's good to play different things too. And Flesh and Blood's still an awesome game. There's so many good decks. So yeah, I miss her, but I'm also okay with it.
And you're also perhaps moving into a format that will force you to re-experience her, because we've got Living Legend coming up in Philadelphia that has just recently been confirmed. Is there any hope of us seeing a new Yuki Lexi list?
I don't know. Um, I will spend some amount of time playing Lexi for sure in that format. I don't know if I believe in her though. Yeah, I spent a fair bit of time playing Lexi and LL, and I think there was a time where she was good. My last experience was that the Starvo decks got a little bit too good, and the Chain and Zen decks also got a little too explosive. Where I think I was playing against Brody at a skirmish,
Mm.
and I CNC'd him, and I think I got him down to like 2 cards or something, and he uh I think this was like pre-ban, but he just did some stubby hammers, blocked with traverse, and my have my 2 cards, and I'm gonna play Shifting Winds of the Mystic Beast and like bonds you like 4 times or whatever. And I think I took like 23 damage off his 2 card hand with traverse. I'm just like, I don't know, like I'm disruptive, but like you miss once, or sometimes you don't even miss and you just die for it, is kind of what it feels like. So I would love to play Lexi. If I think that she is viable, I will definitely be playing her, and you can expect content about her. But she has to be at some minimum level of viability where I feel like I'm not, um, I don't know, shooting myself in the foot by playing the deck, I guess.
Yuki, you have a Patreon and you've been a professional FAB coach for a number of years at this point, um, which, from my seat, is a pretty darn brave thing to do, to basically outwardly and vulnerably say, I have something to give you. If you are going to give me money, I can make you better at this game, essentially. And have, I can foster a player into something better. I can mold you into a, a better version of yourself, essentially. Um, Not only that, the internet, especially passionate niche communities like ours, can be kind of intimidating and judgmental in general. What was it a difficult thing for you to pursue?
Um, I think so. Actually, some people asked me about coaching before I ever posted, and I had a couple sessions here and there, and that sort of made me feel a little more comfortable trying it out and putting a post out there and seeing how it went. And I think it's been something that people have had good experiences. They talk about it. That helps me have more people come and do some coaching with me and get to meet new people. And it kind of fuels itself, and it also makes me feel, I guess, confident that I have something to offer people and that people are finding it beneficial, which is kind of the biggest thing, right? Like, as a coach or as a teacher, the biggest thing is people being like, oh, like I top eight in my first BQ, or or like whatever it is. I qualified for nationals, or I top eight in my nationals. There's people at all kinds of different levels with all kinds of different goals, but seeing them improve and do better and meet those goals is just kind of like I guess, the thing that we strive for, and the most exciting and rewarding times as a coach. And not everybody succeeds every season. That's how it goes. We all have our down seasons. But um, but yeah, people who kind of generally getting better over time is like a huge confidence boost. So I found it kind of okay to get into. I very much kind of view a lot of like on the content side, I view a lot of the content I make as content I would want to read if I was a player. And so I don't think I necessarily expected to be as successful as I am, but I didn't feel that intimidated about it, because I was like, well, this is just like what I would want to read, and like maybe people will like it, maybe people won't, but like this is, I guess just because like I kind of like approach all of that with like authenticity and just like that being key. And it's just like, this is what I think. It might not be right, but this is what I think. And I'm being honest and upfront about that. I'm not holding back secrets or holding back information or hiding things because I want to go spike my nationals. I'm telling you what I think. And that's all I can promise, is that these are my honest thoughts. This is what I truly believe. And you can take those ideas and do with them what you will. But hopefully that'll provide some value and help some people out. And I think approaching it from that place of honesty for me has been maybe like confidence inspiring, or made it feel more comfortable. It's just like, as long as I'm doing that, I'm kind of meeting the goal, and I'm doing kind of like my part, or what I think is important. And if the deck's a flop, it's a flop, but at least I was, it's usually the deck that I'm playing at the tournament, and it's the deck that I brought, and maybe I made a bad call, but that happens. We can't always be right. So yeah.
I also wonder if there's a piece of teaching. I tend to think that understanding how to teach material deepens your own understanding of it. So yeah, I wonder if that goes in line with the way you think about it.
I guess so. Yeah, I do think that I often learn more. I don't know. Playing Zen and going through here's how you play Zen and all the common lines, and trying to be like, well, which card should you tutor when? And being like, well, I don't know. And trying to figure that out and explain that, definitely, I think, helped me understand even better my own lines of play. So I do think it's not the it's like not the primary drive for making content, but I definitely do feel that, and I do get that benefit, and I do appreciate that. So it does help. And yeah, the teaching and learning is always like a very symbiotic relationship between the two of them.
I want to close today, Yuki, with a segment that I think is especially well tailored to you as somebody who knows how to attack the unknown. And I think this is something that you probably think about on a daily basis, regardless of whether you're on a podcast where a host is trying to make you play a dumb game. But the dumb game in question is called One Card to Break. In this section, we're going to ask Yuki about several heroes long gone and some that are here to stay, and see if she can come up with a single undesigned card. Please excuse my screaming cat. To break them in the CC format. Sound fun, Yuki?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. Number one, Lexi Livewire pre-Outsiders buff.
So I have two cards that are very similar, and I'm gonna say both of them. The thing I wanted more than anything for Lexi pre Outsiders was just a 1 for 5 ice arrow and a 0 for 4 lightning arrow. Probably at Majestic, one of each. If I was being really greedy, I'd have them as a cycle. um,
Mm,
but I always felt that that hero's biggest weakness was that you either didn't have enough ice cards to be able to fuse all the time, or you had so many ice cards that you would not draw arrows and then you would brick on all ice cards and you could not really solve the problem because it was actually just like a fundamental math problem. And it would just grant the hero a ton of consistency. And then if you did get a full cycle of both of them, you would actually even be able to play like hybrid or switch lists that could do a bit of both, which I thought was really interesting. And obviously, once we got Outsiders, that'd be way too much. But before that, I think it'd be pretty interesting.
yeah, I'm particularly excited to hear you say that because that was specifically the ice one was something that a teammate of mine and I had theory crafted a long time ago. Like if we just had this, we could be so
Yeah.
epic.
Yeah.
Moving
Yeah, I
on.
think it's quite an elegant solution where it's like not this overpowered card, but it just
Mhm.
kind of fills in a gap. Yeah.
And I think that's exactly why I wanted to ask you these questions because I think you are so in tune with like the spirit of what we're trying to do here. Like I think certain people I would ask would maybe say like, oh, a Rain Razor's that buffs all arrows for 4 instead of 2 or something like that. Like you're very much even keeled with the cards that you design in these situations.
I'll try
Moving
my
on,
best. I'll try my best.
let's talk about Syndra. How about Syndra right now at this very instance? Let's say with the High Seas release.
Yeah, I wish that Syndra either had probably, I think like a way to, I don't have a specific card, but I think a way to tutor Wrath of Retribution would be huge for the deck. I think that you can do some very cool stuff leaning into, so she's great with Mask of Momentum, but with Mask of Pouncing Link, she can lean into these kind of combo turns with like Blood Runs Deep and the specialization. Giving her 3 of the specialization is probably not a great idea. I can see why
Mm.
they made it a specialization and a legendary where you only get one of them. It's probably a little bit much otherwise. But I think that having a way to have it on demand so you could set up those um those Wrath of Retribution plus Blood Runs Deep turns would be absolutely incredible.
And now that you mention it, it's making me kind of realize probably why Wrath of Retribution costs 3, so that it's like just outside Pouncing Link's territory. Makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think if you could tutor either half of it off of links, it'd be pretty crazy.
Next up is a pet deck that you and your partner Ellie worked on and had great success with, Sir Bolton, Breaker of Dawn. Let's talk about, let's just say any point in his tenure in the game. Is there a card that makes him viable? Or maybe super viable?
um Ellie would probably say Nimby. Nimby is the card that he needed. Nimby is very, very good for Bolton. I think he's a lot better now. Um, yeah, 0 for 6 is great. He's one of the few heroes that can give it go again, and you're pretty happy to play a Nimblism effect that buffs up an attack and enables you to give it go again. So I think that Nimby is pretty close to the ideal card for Bolton. Before that, the card that I had in mind was sort of like a take flight that costs 0.
Mm,
Even if it's a head job, like a 0 for 3, just something that lets you go up on soul and has built-in go again. Like maybe like if you've charged like a not bad light the way you have to, if you charge a yellow, you have to hit 3 for 0. If you charge a yellow, it gets go again. I think that would have been huge. 0 for 4 especially would be really, really good. I don't know if it's maybe too good, but yeah, I think a lot of Bolton's problems have been taking a little bit too much time to get his soul online before he kind of like really hits his stride.
mm.
And just having take flight's just kind of a little underrate at this point. And having a 0 cost one would be huge because that deck does not really like pitching. So you kind of like have to play take fight, but it's like just kind of begrudgingly is how I describe it.
Do you think that that works equally in the Raiden build and the combo build?
Um, Probably wouldn't help the combo build that much. I don't know if the combo build should get support. Is my honest answer. Um, that yeah, there's certain decks that you only want to be so good, and I don't. I think if the combo build is ever like an S tier deck, like that's not a very fun meta game. So I'm gonna talk about Raiden Bolton, and I don't know. I'm sure there's lots of fun things you could give combo Bolton, but yeah, yeah, that's not a deck that I think needs some more support personally, especially after the tome banning. Like maybe pre-tomes is a little different, but I think we're kind of moving away from those I don't know spaces.
Maybe explosive spaces, shall we say?
Yeah.
Let's now turn to a hero that probably anybody in this game would say needs some serious support. That's Olympia Prize Fighter. But let's focus on him during the heavy meta when Hatchet Story and KO and maybe a little bit Kasai were all pretty dominant. What does he need in that situation?
I think he just needs wage cards that aren't terrible. And I think that Betsy kind of has the same problem. Like wage is this like very cool limited mechanic, but outside of up the ante, like I don't really know what we're doing here.
Mm-hmm.
You get these like really marginal on hits that punish you if your opponent blocks it out, and like yes, you get the gold, and the gold is like actually quite good. And some people would be like, what the thing that you actually need is gold payoffs. I'm not actually sure that's true. I think that having better wager cards would be the biggest thing. Like you have these CC decks, and you're playing like edge aheads, which are these like 1 for 3 block 3 go again pumps, or you're playing like wage agility, and it's like this 3 for 7 that blocks 2, and it's like really like these are the cards we're playing, and like you have to because they're the only
Mm-hmm.
cards that wager, but like you just need like honestly just like a set of respectable wager cards that have real stats on them, and I think that it would go a long ways for that hero. I don't know if it would make him like good, but it would make him not feel so bad. Yeah.
I almost wonder if there's an apprehension about making those and then like allowing heroes that don't center on wager also run. Like I don't know. I wonder if there's an
Mhm.
apprehension about the wage mechanic tying too closely into the other heroes as well. Which I mean, I guess at that point you could just make them specializations and skirt that issue. But yeah, I hear what you're saying, and it is a curious question from a design perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about Reinar? Let's say before the Scepter of Pain ban, but after the Aurora LL, because there was kind of a buzz about like, is it Reinar's time? Because the best deck in the format just wants to block, and Reinar can make it so that he can't. But I don't know if we saw it come to fruition because we didn't have enough time, or if he just was missing one tool.
Yeah. It's a little hard to say. I think Reiner is still like maybe decent. I think he's at least the best that he's been in a long time. Sea Legs was huge for that hero, I think. Just giving him the ability to like have go again on demand is really big. I think I'm so yeah, I guess I have a cop out again where I don't have an exact card design, but Reiner needs something to do on his non-Blood Rush Bellow turns. And it can't be Blood Rush Bellows 4, 5, 6 because that's probably not is probably like too much.
Yeah.
But it feels the deck feels so much like how many blood rushes did I draw and resolve and have them do the thing that they're supposed to do. And if the answer is like 3, like you play an aggro deck and you just run them over and you just smash them. You beat up just about anybody, but the problem is he's just so contingent on that, and all the non blood rush turns are just so miserable. So I think he needs like one more power card that kind of fills in those turns that is
Mm.
not a blood rush bellow but allows him to do something strong. And I think that we're seeing a little bit of that. Like we've seen like Splatter Skull be this like disruptive piece, and he's been picking up new tools, and I think he's getting closer. But he kind of struggles into aggro. He just doesn't have the numbers, and so I think he does kind of need either a lot more disruption or just something to kind of make up the rate on the non-blood rush turns. I think is really, really what he's missing.
How about Max Nitro right now?
High octane, or like a reasonable replacement for it. Yeah, I mean, they give him an armory deck. They let him build this wrench. I don't think the wrench is cute. I don't think it's really good enough. I still think that the mech was the most powerful thing that he does, but you have to jump through so many hoops to make that thing, and even once you make it, they can kind of block it out. So maybe high octane's too much. We're kind of moving away from those decks that can just like otk you, but he needs access to action points in a way that's reasonable. So like I don't think the make two golden cogs card, I can't remember what it's called, cog in the
Cog in
machine
the
or
machine.
whatever,
Yep.
that that I don't think that card like really gets there for Max. Like he needs, I feel like they could give him like a spec that lets him like turn his hyper drivers that are on board into action points or something, like destroy them, get an action point. Something like that could be a really cool get for him, but he needs some way to leverage the mech, I think is what Max needs more than anything, because he can play this kind of boost game that's kind of reasonable, and like maybe he finishes on a mech, and that beats up a lot of stuff, like into a lot of decks that's like kind of okay. But as soon as you start getting to any deck that wants to block you, it's just what are we, how do you ever win? There's just no plan. And yeah, I think action points is like the most obvious um one card way to do that.
When you say it, I really like that converting hyperdrivers into action points bit, just because, I mean, the deck is built to make hyperdrivers, right? So, especially after the transformation into the mech, it's like, what do I do with all these cards that are creating hyperdrivers? And maybe that is a
Yeah.
really, granted, another hoop to jump through, but a powerful effect.
Yeah. He needs something. I don't know. I think we all know that he needs something. Hopefully Max will have his day. I know a lot of people love that hero. He's like very cool,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah,
I
yeah,
myself
it's
would
definitely
would
Max time.
love an excuse to play that guy, because he is like,
Yeah.
dude, coming out kind of at the tail end of the cyberpunk era. So cool to see an edge runner basically like copy
Yes.
pasted into the game, you know?
Yeah.
And the flavor of the wrench, like, come on. Like, I want to hit people with
Yeah.
wrenches.
Yeah. No, he's very cool, and the theming and the aesthetic and everything is awesome. And then he's just so, yeah, he falls a little bit short,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, last one, Yuki. Aurora Shooting Star in the Living Legend meta, let's say coming up in Philadelphia. Because I
Yeah.
think in general, at least my personal assumption, and I think a lot of the communities, is that there's no way she can stand up to Briar, right? Like everyone in the Rosetta set seemed to be kind of like Tales of Aria heroes light, because
Yeah.
everybody says the power level of that set was through the roof. So what happens to these heroes once they living legend? Do they have a place even in these expanded formats?
Yeah, I think this is one that really stumped me. When now that you ask it, it's like I think it's so hard for these. I was listening to, I think it was Arsenal Pass. They were talking about this, where like Living Legend is not the format where you play your favorite LL hero. It's the format where you play like Starvo and Chain and like whatever else. Um, and I think a real challenge in this format that I don't know if can be resolved is like Chain is just such a good rune blade. He's so good, and it's hard for other rune blades to really compete. Maybe that means expanding the lightning pool, but that has the side effect of making Starvo better. I guess you can go the route of like these armory decks with like maybe make like lightning rune blade cards. She might still kind of pale in comparison to Briar, who has like the access to the earth too, though. Um, So yeah, I can't think of a great answer for this one, but what I'll say is that I think, especially as we have more and more and more heroes LL, that's just going to be the nature of the format.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be good heroes and there's going to be heroes that aren't viable. And I mean, like you see it in CC, right? We have 30 heroes. They're not all viable
Mm-hmm.
and they're not going to be. And hopefully that shifts and changes and they get support and things happen. But I think especially as you get to eternal formats in card games, this really tends to happen. You see this in, in Magic, who has very established eternal formats, and so many of those
Mm-hmm.
decks, like, they get no new tools, but it's like, yep, you can still play like the Reanimator deck in Legacy, and maybe the cards that you use to reanimate and the cards that you're reanimating change, and you get upgrades, and it's more good or less good. But there's certain decks that are very good in that format, and there's a whole bunch of decks that you can never ever play. And I think Living Legend's going to be similar, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think it's just maybe a shift in people's mindset that, like, it's pretty hard to make everything viable in this eternal format where there's going to be like all the most broken heroes of all time. And like, like if we fast forward and like 6 years from now we have 10 guardians, like one of them is going to be the best.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I mean? And that's kind of okay. So I don't know. Maybe there is like something really sweet. Maybe they'll make an Aurora LL deck and I'll be proven wrong. I would love to see that. I think Aurora is like a really, really sweet design and really
Mm-hmm.
fun. But I do think it's hard to make her, you push the Runeblade cards, Chain probably gets quite a bit better, or Viscera gets a lot better. And then if you push the Lightning cards, you like Starvo or Briar get a lot better. So it does feel, outside of just like printing a whole bunch of specializations, it feels really hard to push specific heroes in LL, I think.
Which is a curious thing because this is kind of turned into a more meta discussion of the LL format in general, which I think is very interesting, by the way. And it makes me think about a solution somebody proposed to me. Not that I have any power in this situation, but to kind of fix this issue that you're talking about, where there's one of each class that is essentially the best, and that's what you're playing in LL if you want to access those classes. Um, where the proposed solution could be, for a season, ban Starvo and Chain, or replace that with any of X number of heroes. And just maybe shifting the perspective of what the LL format is rather than being the most high powered thing in the game, maybe changing that more to this is an experimental playground. Like what if we remove Starvo from the equation? All of a sudden, do we have a ton of Oldhams running around, or replace that with Chain and be like, is this Vincent suddenly the premier Shadow Runeblade for a season, and somebody unlocks something there? I don't know. What is your take on that as maybe a viable solution?
I think it's like definitely a thing that they could do. I think it would shift kind of like the ethos of the format a lot,
Mm-hmm.
which is maybe okay, honestly. Um I also kind of feel like, as much as Living Legends this way, I don't know if it's a problem. Like maybe it's a problem. Maybe it's a problem in Flesh and Blood because people get attached to heroes and people want to play their heroes, and maybe that's a reason that the model doesn't work. But I do think that it's like okay for there to be these eternal formats and them for them to be high power level and for them to get kind of centralized on powerful decks. I think that that's a thing that happens in a lot of card games, and I don't think it's a bad thing. It's a format that will not be for everybody, but that's okay. You know, not everybody loves CC and draft equally, and we still have both those formats. And we have Project Blue as an option now, and I think having multiple formats is just a good thing. And I think you'll find even this high powered LL format where it's maybe a bit narrow, I bet as we start seeing it in PQs coming up, we start seeing it at Worlds, you're gonna have people where like LL is their favorite format, and that's cool. And you're gonna have people who don't like LL, and that's cool too. And I think it's okay. Like I don't think the format's never gonna be for everybody, I guess is what I feel like. I think people are gonna want different things from it, and as long as I think for me, the biggest thing is as long as it's enjoyable and as long as some people are getting value out of it and some people like it, that's kind of more important than it being, I don't know, this like
Completely
ideal world
equitable,
where,
maybe,
yeah,
for all heroes.
yeah, yeah. Like I think you want some level of balance where you have some options that are relatively balanced amongst each other, but I don't think every single hero, like the longer that goes on, I think the more unrealistic it gets, right? That every single hero is going to be perfectly balanced. I just don't think it's like a nice thought, but I don't think it's a realistic goal to have.
Well, Yuki,
So
thank you so much for your thoughts on the Living Legend format, cards to break, and everything else. We really appreciate you. If people want to see more, or see or hear more from Yuki, where can they find you?
yeah, so you can find me on Twitter or Blue Sky. I'm at Yuki Lee Bender, and you can also find me over on Patreon. So patreon.com/on the Bauble. We also have a podcast called On the Bauble, and you can find us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, most of them, Spotify, like most of your podcasting platforms. It should be on there. If it's not on there, feel free to send me a message on Twitter or whatever, and I would love to add it on there. We've been like slowly adding a couple different ones here and there, but as far as I'm aware, it's on most of the podcasting platforms that people seem to use because I haven't gotten too many new messages about that recently. So yeah, check us out.
I don't know if you felt the same draw, but I've always wanted to be able to say on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and I just can't yet.
Yeah, it's like probably most of them, but maybe not some of them.
Yeah. Or wherever you get your podcast that matters.
Ooh, those are dangerous words. You're gonna upset somebody for
I know, here I
sure.
go. I'm one episode in and I'm already gonna
Oh
burn the place to
no.
the ground. Well, thanks so much, Yuki. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been our first episode of Cardboard and Beyond. Our host, of course, was Yuki Lee Bender, and she was absolutely amazing. If you want to see more from us, we will have more episodes coming your way at an undefined gap of time. You can also find us at the Arcane Games and Events YouTube channel, where we host a regional circuit every single month in Los Angeles and now New England. And so, on behalf of myself, Yuki Lee Bender, and Arcane Games and Events, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.